I said no to my dad's mortgage. He told me I was dead to him. I, 22F, have always been labeled the responsible one. I'm the youngest of three, with siblings in their 30s, but for as long as I can remember, I've been the one people turn to when things need to be organized, handled, or paid for. I started working young, built up my credit score like it was a holy relic, and secured a steady US-based income right out of school. I take pride in that. I've worked hard to make sure I never have to ask anyone for anything. About 6 months ago, my dad, 55M, called me. We were on good terms then, or so I thought. He told me he found a house he wanted to buy. He's been renting for years, and he wanted something permanent. Then came the ask. He told me his credit wasn't where it needed to be, and that his debt-to-income ratio was off. He asked me to co-sign the mortgage. He framed it as a compliment. "You're the only one I can trust with this," he said. "Your siblings are, well, you know how they are with money. But you're the responsible one. You have the steady income. It's just a signature, it won't affect you." I felt a pit in my stomach immediately. I'm 22. I'm in the very early stages of my career. I live with my partner, and we've been talking seriously about our own future, buying our own home in a few years, maybe starting a family. I knew enough about personal finance to know that just a signature means I am 100% legally responsible for the entire debt. If he missed a payment, my credit would be nuked. If I wanted to buy my own house, this mortgage would count against my debt-to-income ratio, likely making it impossible for me to get a loan. I told him no. I tried to be gentle. I explained that I was just starting my life, and that I couldn't take on that kind of legal risk. I told him I loved him, and I'd help him look for credit repair services, but I couldn't tie my legal identity to a 30-year loan. The mask didn't just slip, it shattered. His tone shifted from proud father to indignant creditor in seconds. He started listing every single thing he had ever done for me. He brought up the car I drove, which was in my name, but he had helped me get, the business idea he supported me on years ago, the roof over my head when I was a child. He called me selfish. He said I was ungrateful and that I was disappointing as a daughter. He told me that the one time he asked me for something, I turned my back on him. It was a total character assassination. He ended the call by telling me that if I was going to be independent, I needed to be fully independent. He told me to get off the family phone plan immediately and said that if I saw him in public, I should act like I don't know him. I was devastated, but I'm also a person of my word. If he wanted me gone, I'd go. Within 3 days, I had my own phone plan. I returned the car he mentioned. Even though it was legally mine, I didn't want the gift held over my head anymore. I spent that week untangling every single minor financial tie we had. It was an exhausting, cold process of clicking remove user and cancel authorization on various accounts. But then, things got complicated. There's a layer of this story my family doesn't know, and it's the source of my deepest anxiety. A few years ago, my dad and I tried to start an Airbnb business. We put a lot of money into it, but it failed spectacularly due to a landlord dispute. There is an ongoing lawsuit regarding that dispute, and the furniture from the business, expensive pieces that my dad is obsessed with, was placed in a professional storage unit. My dad's plan was to keep this furniture in storage for years, paying $250 a month until one day he gets a home and can use it. The thing is, I was the one paying that $250 a month for 3 years, even after the business failed, even after I lost my job briefly last year. During that period of unemployment, I couldn't keep up with the payments. I was drowning. I defaulted on the storage unit, and because I couldn't pay the back rent, the contents were auctioned off. Everything is gone. The furniture, the investment, all of it. I haven't told my family. In our culture, and especially in my family, shame is a powerful currency. At the time it happened, things were already tense, and I was terrified of adding fuel to the fire. My dad and my sister still believe that furniture is sitting in a climate-controlled room, waiting to be recovered once the lawsuit is settled. They think the value of that furniture is still a key part of the legal case. And yet, even after my dad told me to act like I don't know him, he started using my sister, 30F, as a mouthpiece. My sister calls me constantly. It's never, "How are you?" or "I miss you." It's always a list of demands or questions for my dad. Dad wants to know the status of the lawsuit. Dad wants to know if you've checked on the storage unit lately. Dad says you need to make sure the lawyers have the inventory list for the furniture. I tried to have calm conversations with him early on to resolve the co-signing fight, but he either ignores my calls or uses the opportunity to tell me how much I've changed and how I've become a cold, Americanized brat who doesn't care about her elders. Eventually, I just stopped responding. I went no contact. I blocked his number for the sake of my own mental health. But my sister won't stop. She acts like a courier for his resentment. Every time I pick up the phone, I'm dragged back into a world where I'm a failure. She knows he's being unreasonable about the mortgage, but she says, "He's our dad. You just have to deal with it. Just give him what he wants regarding the storage info so he stops bothering me." It feels like I'm being suffocated. I'm 22 years old, and I feel like I'm carrying the weight of a 55-year-old man's failed dreams. I feel guilty about the storage unit, but I also feel a boiling rage that he expected me to pay $250 a month for 3 years, a total of $9,000, to store furniture for a house he didn't even have, while he was simultaneously calling me selfish for not signing away my financial future. I recently told my sister that if she doesn't stop bringing him up, I'm going to have to block her too. She lost it. She said I'm tearing the family apart over money and that I'm being dramatic. But is it just money? To me, it feels like my dignity. It feels like my right to say no without being erased from the family. I'm terrified of the moment the truth about the storage unit comes out. The lawsuit is still moving, and eventually, the lawyers will ask for proof of the current state of the assets. When they find out I lost them, I know the narrative will be that I stole his future. They won't care that I spent thousands of my own dollars trying to save it while he did nothing. I want to stay no contact. I want to move to a new city where they don't have my address. I want to build a life where being responsible isn't a weapon used against me. Am I the a-hole for refusing to co-sign, cutting off my dad, and potentially cutting off my sister to get some peace? Update 1. I've been reading some of the comments. Many of you are saying I should have told them about the storage unit sooner. I know. I wake up with a knot in my stomach every day because of that lie. But you have to understand the dynamic. My dad is a man who views his children as extensions of his own success. Admitting I failed to protect his assets would have resulted in an explosion that I wasn't mentally prepared for while I was unemployed. My sister called again an hour ago. She didn't leave a voicemail, but she sent a text. Dad is asking for the key to the storage unit. He wants to go see the furniture this weekend to clear his head. Just send the location and tell me where the key is. My heart is pounding. I can't keep this up. I feel like I'm about to jump off a cliff, but I don't know if I should tell her the truth or just block them both and disappear. Update 2. I did it. I didn't send the key. I sent a long text to my sister explaining that the storage unit was auctioned off over a year ago because I couldn't afford the $250 per month payments while I was out of work. I told her that since Dad had already told me to act like I don't know him, he can find his own way to clear his head. I told her I was blocking her for a while. I need silence. The fallout is going to be nuclear. I can already hear the selfish and disappointing labels being polished and ready to be thrown at me. But for the first time in 6 months, I'm not waiting for the phone to ring. Update 3. For the first 2 days after I blocked them, nothing happened. No unknown numbers, no emails, no social media messages. The quiet felt unnatural, like the pause after a loud noise when your ears are still ringing. I kept checking my phone, anyway. I'd wake up during the night, convinced I heard a notification. My body didn't seem to believe the conflict had actually stopped. I realized how used I had become to living in anticipation of criticism, waiting for the next demand or accusation before it even arrived. On the 3rd day, the silence ended. My sister emailed me from an address I didn't recognize. The message was long, emotional, and all over the place. She wasn't asking questions so much as reacting to the reality that the furniture was gone. She said she had told our dad immediately after reading my text because she didn't want to carry secrets. According to her, he didn't believe it at first. He assumed I was lying to punish him for the mortgage argument. He apparently insisted that I was hiding the furniture somewhere or refusing to give him access out of spite. That hurt more than I expected. Not because I needed him to believe me, but because it confirmed something I had been trying not to fully accept. In his version of reality, I am capable of betrayal, but not struggle. The idea that I simply couldn't afford the payments didn't fit the image he had built of me as the endlessly capable child who solves problems without failing. My sister wrote that he demanded proof, so she asked me to send documentation showing the storage account closure and auction notice. I didn't respond right away. I sat with that request for nearly a full day, trying to figure out whether engaging again would reopen the door I had just managed to close. Eventually, I sent the documents. Not as an invitation to continue talking, just as a final confirmation of facts. I attached the payment history showing 3 years of charges coming from my account, the overdue notices, and the auction letter. I didn't add commentary. I didn't defend myself. I just sent the files and muted the thread. That was the moment everything shifted. Instead of apologizing or even acknowledging the financial burden I had carried, my sister replied with anger that felt strangely detached from reality. She focused almost entirely on the lawsuit. Her concern wasn't that I had paid thousands alone or that I had struggled during unemployment. She was worried that the missing furniture would weaken the legal case and make our dad look irresponsible. She told me I should have told them sooner so they could have found a solution. Reading that made something click in my head. I realized there had never actually been a solution available. During the entire period I was paying for storage, nobody had asked whether I could afford it. The responsibility existed quietly as long as I handled it without complaint. The expectation wasn't shared responsibility, it was silent endurance. A few hours later, my dad contacted me through an unknown number. I had expected rage, but what came instead was a long stream of messages alternating between disbelief and accusation. He wrote that I had destroyed years of planning, that I had embarrassed him, that I should have asked for help rather than letting strangers steal family property. He framed the auction as negligence rather than financial collapse. What stood out wasn't the anger itself. It was the complete absence of curiosity. He didn't ask what my life had been like when I lost my job. He didn't ask how I managed rent or groceries. There was no moment where he wondered whether I had been scared or overwhelmed. The only thing that mattered was the loss of something he considered his.
I didn't respond.
I blocked the number immediately. That decision felt different from the first time I blocked him. Before, it came from panic and emotional exhaustion. This time it felt deliberate.
I
understood that any attempt to explain myself would turn into another trial where I had to prove my worth. The fallout spread through extended family faster than I expected. Within a week, relatives I rarely speak to began reaching out with vague messages asking if everything was okay or telling me that family conflicts shouldn't go too far. Nobody asked what actually happened. The narrative had already formed somewhere else, and I could tell I was being cast as the ungrateful daughter who abandoned her father after he needed help. One aunt told me I should remember that parents sacrifice everything for their children. Another suggested that financial support is part of respecting elders. I listened politely and ended the conversations quickly. Arguing would have required explaining years of context to people who had already chosen a side based on hierarchy rather than facts. What surprised me most was how tired I felt rather than angry. For years, I had been running on adrenaline, trying to maintain stability for everyone while convincing myself it was normal. Once I stepped away, the exhaustion hit all at once. I slept more than I have in years. My partner noticed before I did. They said I seemed quieter but less tense, like my shoulders finally dropped after being raised for too long. Around that time, something else happened that forced me to confront the situation more practically. The lawyer handling the lawsuit contacted me directly. Apparently, my dad had asked about accessing the stored assets, which triggered a request for verification. I had been dreading that moment for months, imagining catastrophic consequences, but the conversation was unexpectedly straightforward. I explained that the storage unit had been forfeited after non-payment during a period of unemployment and provided the documentation. The lawyer didn't react with outrage or accusation. He simply asked clarifying questions about timelines and ownership. From a legal perspective, the furniture had already been considered depreciating assets with disputed relevance. Losing them complicated things, but didn't destroy the case the way my family had assumed. When the call ended, I sat there staring at my desk, realizing I had carried fear far larger than reality. The disaster I imagined existed mostly in my father's expectations, not in legal consequences. That realization changed something fundamental in how I viewed the past 3 years. I had been living inside his sense of urgency and importance, measuring my actions against his reactions rather than objective outcomes. Once an outside professional treated the situation as manageable, the emotional weight shrank dramatically. My sister attempted contact again about a week later, this time with a softer tone. She wrote that our dad was deeply hurt and felt betrayed, but she also admitted she hadn't known I was paying for the storage alone. She said she thought he had been contributing. That admission stung because it confirmed how invisible my effort had been. Even within the family, my role had been assumed rather than recognized. She asked if we could talk without discussing the mortgage or the lawsuit, just as sisters. I thought about it seriously. I missed having a sibling relationship that didn't revolve around mediating our father's emotions. But I also knew that every previous attempt at neutral conversation eventually circled back to his grievances. I told her I needed more time and that any future relationship would require a boundary. I would not discuss our father or act as a messenger between them. She didn't respond right away. A few days later, she replied that she didn't know if that was possible because family is connected. That was the moment I understood we were operating from completely different definitions of loyalty. Since then, communication has stopped again. Life outside the conflict has felt strangely unfamiliar. I've started noticing small things I ignored before, like how peaceful my evenings are when I'm not bracing for a stressful call. My partner and I have been talking more openly about our future, not in hypothetical terms but real planning. For the first time, saving money feels like building something rather than preparing to rescue someone else. I also started therapy, which is something I had postponed for years because I convinced myself I was handling everything fine. During one session, I described being labeled the responsible one since childhood, and the therapist pointed out how easily responsibility turns into obligation when boundaries aren't allowed. That sentence stayed with me all week. Responsibility had become my identity, and losing that role felt almost like losing a part of myself. There are still moments when guilt hits unexpectedly. I'll remember a childhood memory with my dad and feel a wave of sadness, wondering whether things could have turned out differently if I had agreed to co-sign or told the truth sooner about the storage unit. Then I remind myself that a healthy relationship shouldn't depend on sacrificing financial security or emotional safety. The most difficult part has been accepting that clarity doesn't automatically bring closure. I used to believe that if I explained myself well enough, my intentions would eventually be understood. Now I see that understanding requires willingness from both sides. Without that, explanations just become ammunition for further arguments. A mutual acquaintance recently told me my dad has been telling people that I've changed since becoming financially independent, that I value money over family. Hearing that hurt, but it also felt strangely freeing. For years, I worked hard to maintain an image that would prevent disappointment. Now that disappointment exists regardless of my actions, there's nothing left to perform. I don't know what the future holds with my family. Maybe distance will soften things over time. Maybe it won't. Right now, my focus is smaller and more immediate, building a life where my stability isn't conditional on meeting someone else's expectations. There's a noticeable difference in how I wake up each morning. The knot in my stomach that used to appear the moment I checked my phone is gone. I still think about them, but the thoughts don't spiral the way they used to. Instead of rehearsing arguments in my head, I'm planning normal things. Work projects, trips we might take, the possibility of moving to a new city without fear that I'm abandoning responsibilities that were never truly mine. Looking back, the mortgage request feels less like the beginning of the conflict and more like the moment a long-standing dynamic finally became visible. Saying no didn't create the problem, it exposed it. The storage unit, the guilt, the pressure to fix everything quietly, those patterns were already there. Refusing to co-sign simply removed the illusion that my role was voluntary. I don't feel triumphant or vindicated. Mostly, I feel relieved, mixed with grief for the relationship I thought I had. There's a version of my dad who exists in my memories, supportive and proud, and reconciling that image with the person who called me selfish has been harder than any financial stress. For now, no contact remains in place. Not out of anger, but because every attempt at communication pulls me back into a cycle that leaves me drained and anxious. Maybe one day there will be a conversation grounded in mutual respect. Until then, distance is the only thing that has allowed me to breathe. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Daily Tales Update for more such stories.